Então, passando para a próxima palestra, ela vai ser ministrada pelo professor Mitchell Cox. O professor Mitchell, ele é professor da Universidade de Witwatersrand, de Joanesburgo. Ele vai falar para a gente um pouquinho sobre o cenário de Space na África do Sul, que é um dos países líderes nessa tecnologia no mundo, certo? Então, professor Mitchell, welcome to your workshop. Thank you very much for your presence. The floor is yours.
Cool, thank you very much, Luciano. Hello, everyone. So just a change of language. Unfortunately, my Portuguese is no good. So I'm going to be talking to you about the social and economic landscape of TV white space in South Africa and focusing on a few success stories and case studies. So just to start off, this was the internet back in 2012. This was called the Kana botnet. And what it did was infect as many computers as it could find on the internet and then ping everything it could see and then phone home to whoever was the person who made this virus. And what we can see is places like South Africa have some internet connectivity and places like Africa pretty much have almost none. And if we were come to closer to the present, only about a third of African people actually make use of the internet. And this is definitely a very big digital divide that we have here in Africa and South Africa. There are 1.5 billion people in Africa, and that means that 1 billion African people simply don't use the internet. And you can see in 2010, there was a lot of red here, it was a lot worse, and it's getting better pretty quickly, but it's still not great. In terms of subsea fiber connectivity, particularly to South Africa down here, it's pretty good. We have over 200 terabits per second of internet, sort of international bandwidth. And through the Optica Foundation and my student chapter at my university, we've done a couple of nice outreach activities to explore these cable landing stations and things. But the question is, why is only a third of people actually making use of the internet when Africa seems to have quite good subsea connectivity? And the reason is, if we have a look here on the left, you can see that there are many places where we don't have terrestrial fiber. And here in South Africa, you can see we definitely have quite a lot more. And this sort of correlates a lot to the population density of Africa and where there also is no connectivity. Now, I think Brazil is really a massive country and is probably about half the size of Africa. So I imagine that you guys definitely have similar problems, but on a national scale rather than a continental scale. And if we have a look at why, well, we can see the true size of Africa. You can fit China, the United States, India, and most of Europe into the area of Africa. So if you think about some of those gaps in the fiber, those are the size of entire European countries. Now, if we have a look at mobile data coverage in South Africa, this is where most people start thinking, well, you know, surely there's coverage. Wherever I go, I can normally find 4G. If we have a look, the situation is quite good. In 2024, we actually have 99% coverage of 4G of the population. It's not of the entire country. There are parts here in the, on the left-hand side of the slide. This is mostly desert, farmlands and things like that, where there isn't really any connectivity. But we also have almost 50% 5G coverage. 44% of the South African population has smartphones, which is very good. And something interesting, August is Women's Month here in South Africa, so I thought I'd put in this stat. Back in 2021, 24%, well, women were 24% less likely to have a smartphone than men. But only a few years later, that stat has improved by 10%, which is very good. Now, in Johannesburg, where I'm from, connectivity isn't really an issue anymore. There's a lovely photo of Johannesburg. Those of you that have been here, I hope that you saw this view. And on the bottom left of the slide, this is the university, Wits University, which is much easier to pronounce. We're over 100 years old, and we definitely have quite a lot of students. And you can see where we are. We're sort of right in the center here, where there is plenty of fiber connectivity. The thing is mobile data actually pervasive? This is a picture of places that you see in Johannesburg. On the one side of the valley, we see people that are clearly connected. They probably have 5G or even fiber to the home. Nowadays, they would have solar panels, many of them boreholes. But on the other side of the valley, probably less than a kilometer away, we have people that are obviously unconnected. And these people have no infrastructure, let alone good internet. And that shows that the real problem here in South Africa is actually affordability. A 12 gigabyte 4G bundle costs around 500 Rand per month, which is something like $25, and uncapped is only a little bit more. Even though that doesn't seem like a lot of money, the average low-income household's income is something only like $200, which means that 15% of someone's household income or a family's income would need to be spent on internet. And this is just too much. The global benchmark is something like 2%. So the digital divide in South Africa is something like we have good coverage, but we have poor affordability. And the problem is good coverage with good performance is very expensive for the service providers. Now, what I'd like to address now is, can TV white space actually help that? So what is TV white space in South Africa? Well, TV white space is simply the unused channels, in our case, of the UHF TV band. So because these are lower frequencies, around 500 megahertz, compared to the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz of Wi-Fi, for example, the signals can travel far and cut through trees and buildings. The important bit is control, though, because we don't want to interfere with actual TV channels. Devices don't just transmit, they first ask a certified database what channel and power are safe at that location. That database protection is what makes the shared use workable and keeps the TV broadcasters happy. This is the South African solution, and it seems to work pretty well. In the next few slides, I'll go into a bit more detail of how it works and show some case studies. So in South Africa, which is relatively well connected, we have a relatively last few miles challenge. On this picture here, you can see wherever there's a gray line, that is a deployed fiber, and wherever there is a dot, regardless of color, is somewhere where at least 1,000 people are living. The color of these dots represents how far away they are from the nearest fiber. So you can see that only about 2/3 of our population lives within a kilometer of fiber, but 95% of the population lives within 10 Ks, and within 20 Ks, we pretty much have almost everyone. So I think maybe this is a great opportunity for TV white space. So let's just have a look at the timeline of South Africa's TV white space journey. South Africa's approach was deliberately evidence-led. In 2012, there was the so-called Cape Town pilot, which was the foundational step. It proved that TV white space could coexist with active broadcasters in a dense environment without causing harmful interference. Next, the 2013 Limpopo trial validated the key use case, demonstrating the technology's effectiveness for long-range, non-line-of-sight rural backhaul. This empirical data directly informed the 2018 regulations, which, upon fully coming into force in April 2021, provided the crucial market certainty for small and medium enterprises to invest and deploy commercial networks. So what do those regulations look like? In South Africa, TV white space is managed through a database-driven dynamic spectrum access system rather than relying on sensing. At the top level, the regulator, called ICASA, sets the rules, what protection distances to use, what powers are allowed, and how often devices need to check in. To make it work in practice, ICASA keeps a reference database of all licensed broadcasters and protected services. Then service providers like the CSIR operate certified secondary databases. These are the live systems that devices actually query. When a master white space device starts up, it locks its GPS location, connects securely to one of these databases, and requests the list of channels available at their location. The database replies with the frequencies that can be used, plus the maximum transmit power on each frequency. The master must then notify the database which channel it selects, and it passes those instructions to its client devices. This setup keeps broadcasters safe because the rules are enforced centrally and automatically. It's also quite strict. Masters must check back with the database regularly, every 24 hours if they're fixed, and every 12 hours if they're nomadic. If a master loses contact, it has to shut down, and its clients will stop too. One point worth noting for comparison with Brazil, in South Africa, the system is fully database controlled. Even if a channel looks quiet, a device cannot transmit unless the database explicitly gives it permission. Now that we roughly know how the system works, I want to give you the high-level picture of how South Africa regulates TV whitespace. The usable band is 470 to 694 megahertz with an exclusion for radio astronomy, for example, the square kilometer array. And I believe that Brazil actually has more bands than us. We recognize two main device types, fixed and nomadic. Within those, we separate masters, which query the national database, and clients, which follow the instructions of the master. The power limits are defined per 8 megahertz TV channel. In urban areas, fixed devices are capped at 36 dBm, or about 4 watts. In rural areas, the ceiling is quite a lot higher, at 41 dBm, or 13 watts. Nomadic devices are restricted to only about 1/10 of a watt, and indoors there is an option for a 7 dB boost if it's granted by the database for things like walls. Antenna heights are also regulated, up to 30 meters in urban settings and 80 meters in rural areas. The system is tightly database controlled. Masters must check in every 24 hours, if, as I've mentioned before, or 12 hours if nomadic. Clients refresh through their master every minute. And if they lose contact, they must shut down within 10 seconds. This ensures the network cannot run unchecked. Finally, coexistence rules are quite strict. No co-channel operation with broadcasters is allowed, and devices must comply with adjacent channel leakage limits. This is obvious, I think. As mentioned before, it all runs through the database managed by ICASA, and operators like CSIR, or anyone, I suppose, who wants to make a little bit of money, may run secondary databases, but they must synchronize at least once a week with the master. So how is this compliance actually enforced? First, devices must be type approved by ICASA, which guarantees they conform to technical and regulatory standards. Second, every certified master device has to implement the PAUSE protocol. That is the international standard that defines how a white space device talks to the Spectrum database. It is what allows a master to securely share its GPS coordinates, request available channels, and then receive the specific frequencies and power levels that it is allowed to use. This makes sure there is consistency across vendors and that ICASA can enforce compliance in a uniform way. Third, built-in safeguards keep devices in line. Masters must check the database on schedule, and the clients must remain linked to their master or shut down quickly. Fourth, consistency is maintained by requiring secondary GLSDs, that's the database, to synchronize with the reference database every week. And finally, ICASA carries out audits and monitoring to verify that operators and databases comply with the framework. Altogether, these measures form a layered system of checks, technical, procedural, and regulatory, that lets TV whitespace operate reliably without causing any harmful interference. So now I'd like to have a look at some key South African TV whitespace case studies. It all started here. This urban pilot in 2012, Cape Town, was led by Stellenbosch University and the CSIR Maraca Institute, supported by Tenet, that's the university's internet service providers, WAPA, and Google. 3 rooftop base stations linked 10 schools over unused TV channels. Links ran up to about 7.5 kilometers and measured speeds reaching around 12 megabits per second on the best paths, and typically 5 to 7 megabits per second to schools. Continuous spectrum monitoring reported no harmful evidence to broadcast TV, which became a key evidence point for regulation. In terms of social impact, thousands of learners and teachers gained reliable internet for the first time, and results informed the early policy work that followed. A few years later, this rural education project in Limpopo was led by the University of Limpopo and the CSIR, with support from Microsoft for Africa and provincial partners. Their university hub backhauled TV whitespace links to 6 secondary schools, as you can see on this map. Individual paths ranged from about 0.5 kilometer to 7.5 kilometers, although hilly terrain. Measured performance was typically 4 to 8 megabits per second with low latency, sufficient for e-learning platforms, video lessons, and general web use. The project introduced first-time online access for several thousand learners again, and hundreds of teachers. And it logged radio frequency behavior alongside service metrics to confirm the clean coexistence with TV. In the Western Cape, the provincial government, working with the CSIR and Google, used the 2013 Cape Town trial, which I spoke about before, as evidence to run broader service pilots and inform planning. Between 2016 and 2018, more than 10 priority sites, schools, libraries, clinics, and municipal offices were connected in phases. The outcome was not only service at those sites, but policy traction. TV whitespace moved from a single pilot to a recognized option in the province's digital inclusion toolbox, alongside fiber and public Wi-Fi for hard-to-reach areas. Operational lessons from these pilots fed to national discussions at ICASA. The last case study I will present was Mankweng in Limpopo. This is near the original Limpopo trial. Researchers and community partners used TV whitespace mainly as a backhaul for neighborhood Wi-Fi hotspots. Hops typically ranged up to about 7 kilometers, depending on the mast height. Aggregate throughput of roughly 10 or 15 megabits per second per sector supported shared links across kiosks and clusters of homes. The social and economic story is the key one. Affordable daily access for residents, improved opportunities for job seekers and students, and local participation in installing and maintaining equipment, which supported small businesses and improved networks. So how about commercialization? I did a search for operators and deployers that have publicly moved TV whitespace from pilot to practice in South Africa. AdNotes is the clearest recent example of commercialization. In March 2024, AdNotes, working with the CSIR, launched a district-scale TV whitespace network in Harigwala, KwaZulu-Natal, which is one of our provinces around Durban area, extending a community Wi-Fi model that had earlier pilots in the province. This was a live paid service aimed at affordability. I think they charged something like $5 a month. During ICASA's temporary spectrum window in April 2020, which they opened for the pandemic, Ntite Communications deployed a TV whitespace network in Donnybrook, also KwaZulu-Natal. Mariah Solutions announced a rural Eastern Cape rollout starting in Mthatha, the capital. And Levin Global was also named for Amatole district in the similar region. These authorizations show early operator interests beyond pilots. Public reporting is strongest for Ntite and Mariah. Indigo Broadband appears here as a deployer or integrator. It worked with CSIR on pre-commercial TV whitespace projects and holds ICASA type approval for their Carlson Gen 3 TV whitespace radios, which they sell. This is useful context when people ask who actually does installations and handovers to the operators. Where names are not on the slide, it's usually because the companies are active under some kind of CSIR program, but not publicly named. I'm keeping the slide to publicly verifiable things only. I can't help but notice that TV whitespace is less common than I would have expected, and I wonder why. In terms of policy, South Africa's TV whitespace is database-driven. Devices may not transmit unless it's authorized, and there is no sensing requirement. That central control is why they can allow higher transmit power per channel, which is pretty useful. So why has adoption been slower than one might expect? In my view, it's mainly practical friction. The vendor market is thin compared with commodity Wi-Fi equipment. Equipment has to clear the ICASA type approval and then the PAWS or GLSD interoperability, which is much higher bar than buying a Wi-Fi access point. Then there are the usual rural realities, which is power, masts, and permissions. At the same time, community Wi-Fi fed by 4 or 5G or nearby fiber is the sort of one expensive backhaul feeding many users model. It can be simpler to deploy and finance, which is why you see Wi-Fi meshes growing quickly. But of course, there are niches where TV whitespace is one of the only options. There are quite a few key people in South Africa working in this space, and having spoken to a few, I think that these two researchers on the slide are key players and worth contacting if you want to know more. I've listed their contact details here. So in conclusion, what is the core takeaway? Well, South Africa has successfully built a world-class framework for a technology perfectly suited to our country's needs, but the final hurdle is proving the business case at scale. The process we followed from the initial pilots in Cape Town and Limpopo to the establishment of the ICASA regulations and the CSIR's database was methodical. It demonstrates that South Africa has the technical and policy-making capability to lead on the continent. We did the hard work, and it seems like we did it right. The technology itself is not in question. We've seen it connect remote schools, power community Wi-Fi networks. It delivers on its promise of robust long-distance links that can bypass the need for expensive trenching or numerous towers, which is a significant advantage in rural and peri-urban landscapes. However, the critical point, technical viability does not guarantee market dominance. The digital divide is fundamentally an economic problem. For a small operator or company, the choice between higher cost specialized TV white space equipment and cheaper mass market Wi-Fi hardware is a difficult one. The operational costs of secure powered towers in remote areas add another layer of complexity. This leads us to the path forward. TV white space is not a silver bullet, but rather a specialized and powerful tool. Its success will be defined by finding the niches where its strengths, long range and non-line of sight, provide an unbeatable value proposition that outweighs the costs. The challenge in South Africa now shifts from the engineer and the regulator to the entrepreneur and the economist to identify and build sustainable business models around these high-impact applications. We've built the engine, but now we need to find the right vehicles for it to power. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Cox, for the very nice presentation. It was a very good view of the possibilities to use TV white space. And I was actually amazed to see that you are using much more power than they are allowed to use here in Brazil. 4 times in urban areas and 130 times more power in rural areas. So what do you know about the device that are being commercialized there? Are you using any new waveforms, or you're based on LTE and the Wi-Fi modified to operate in TV white space?
I'm actually not sure. I think it's normal commercial off-the-shelf devices that are being used. There hasn't been much research that I know of on custom waveforms and things like that. Although I think a homegrown solution would definitely add a lot of value, given the cost, I think, of these off-the-shelf commercial devices, like that Carlson Gen 3 device I mentioned. I think they're not very cheap, and I do believe we can probably do better if we tried.
Wonderful. You have time for more questions, if you have some questions from the floor. Professor Rodrigo.
Thank you, Professor. Just a question on the cost of subscription. I think I've heard you talk about $5 a month. Just checking if that's true. And I think this is a little bit less or substantially less than what we were thinking here in Brazil, but probably has to do with this power issue that Luciano has put up. So my question is, you confirm this value. Is there any subsidy in this value? Is it typical, just for us to have an idea? Thank you.
Yeah, excellent question. Yeah, they advertise it as R5 per day, which if you work it out is roughly, $5 per month. It's about the benchmark. That's sort of the 2% benchmark of affordability for internet access based on these low-income households. I think it's profitable, but it's normally sort of a hybrid model. It links Wi-Fi, TV, white space, and whatever works. So what's very common here in South Africa is the sort of sharing model where you'll take one fiber to the home connection or one 5G uncapped connection and then share that around locally. So these are all fairly small companies running these services. Definitely not the major telcos. I imagine if the major telcos were trying to roll it out, it would probably cost more because they'd have to cross-subsidize and do all sorts of complicated things.
Thank you, Professor Cox. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you can come to Inatel someday and have this conversation in real face. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Cool. Goodbye, everyone.
Bom, nós temos agora um pequeno vídeo para mostrar para vocês como que esse caso de uso na África do Sul cresceu de forma tão intensa. Bom, podemos seguir com o vídeo.
Digital technologies hold vast potential to significantly boost South Africa's growth, especially as it continues to transform industries, improve public services, and foster inclusive economic development. To harness this potential, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, CSIR, and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, have been digitizing rural communities and townships through the Rural Television White Spaces Network Operators Programme, which has empowered 9 SMMEs business and technical support to deliver affordable internet connection in KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, Free State, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo. To date, beneficiary SMME rural network operators under the project have deployed TV white space technology and set up Wi-Fi network infrastructure, providing affordable broadband access for as low as 5 Rand per day for unlimited internet services. Connected communities empowered by the internet are not just linked by wires, but by shared knowledge opportunities and the potential to shape a collective future. Through the initiative, we have connected schools, households, small businesses, and public Wi-Fi hotspots in rural and township communities across 5 provinces. As a result, it has bridged the digital divide for thousands of community members and created both direct and indirect job opportunities for women and youth. Over 183 public Wi-Fi hotspots have been erected, connecting 273 small businesses, over 2,637 households, and 56 public facilities, ultimately providing access to over 70,000 concurrent internet users daily, collectively. Importantly, the beneficiary SMMEs have created 144 job opportunities for local youth and women.
We have chosen Botshabelo as a community that we are connecting, mainly because there are areas within Botshabelo that do not have internet reach, such as the library. A couple of schools within this area have no internet connectivity, even though they have computers and facilities like that, but they are not able to connect or use those equipment.
All SMMEs that are involved in this program, they have created jobs for young people, which is extremely positive. But also they have a very positive impact on the communities. Addressing digital divide is a must in today's society.
The main objective of the program is actually to provide affordable broadband internet connectivity to communities in the remote, rural, and township areas, making sure that they are not left behind with affordable connectivity so that they can also participate in the digital economy and be part of the 4IR.
According to the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, ICASA, only 0.8% of rural households in South Africa have fixed internet access, while in urban and metro areas, only 20.8% of households have fixed internet access.
Njengoba sisebenzisa le Wi-Fi esisebenzisayo, siyakwazi ukuthi singene online, sifunde nabothisha online, sikwazi ukuthi si-connect nabantu abangasisiza ngcono basinike ulwazi olungcono, siphinde futhi si-download nama-exam paper adlule, siphinde si-download nama-apps ukuze asisize ngama-homework, ukuze sizokwazi nathi ukuthi sikhuphule amasokisi ezikoleni sithole ama-marks angcono.
We've been able to connect the community here, to connect the school through the internet. It is our hope that young people from this community do not have to travel long distances using money that's not even there to, first of all, go and apply for jobs, look for opportunities. The enablement that we've brought here through internet connectivity makes it easy for them, first of all, to do that, but also for learning purposes. They are able to access material that would otherwise also require of them to go to libraries, to the city.
Some kids are even failing in university, not because they can't grasp the content that's being offered at university, but simply because they don't know how to type the assignments, right? Because in most universities, you don't submit a written assignment, you have to type the assignment. And then someone gets left behind, not because they didn't understand, but because they didn't know how to use Microsoft Word, you understand? So it's very important for us to take them through that process so that when they get to university and they see all these facilities, it's not new to them.
We'll find kids or maybe teachers in their cars outside the library doing their school their schoolwork, and that has also made people to know about Sechaba Mobile Library.
It has improved our lives very much in terms of accessing information. Since my children are studying, getting access to the internet has been very easy.
The aim is to give the youth an opportunity into an entry-level job which they can use while they're studying instead of not earning any money. And also we also realize that most of our youth in the area do not have places where they can work in the area. They have to move out to go and do whatever they've studied.
This is something that needs to be scaled. I believe even it's not FCTO or UNDP, but I think even like other private sector or other government entities that can come in and join hands, because we are only talking about one particular rural area in South Africa, and we believe there are millions of other communities that they are in need of such impactful intervention.
In the digital age, connectivity is the foundation upon which innovation, collaboration, and progress are built. The impact of the program demonstrates extends well beyond mere statistics. It signifies the beginning of a transformative journey for unconnected and underserved rural communities towards universal broadband access, which is crucial for fostering meaningful participation in the digital industrial revolution and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
Bom, a gente pode ver então que o TVWS Space conseguiu um espaço bastante inclusivo na África do Sul, levando conectividade para quem vivia em áreas sem nenhum tipo de internet. Acima disso, a gente tem que lembrar também que nós temos os benefícios econômicos de trazer conectividade para a transformação digital do agro, da mineração, da água, da energia. Enfim, a gente pode ver que o TVWS Space pode ser uma ferramenta interessante para a gente evoluir com a conectividade do Brasil.